Well, the average cost of a data breach in the ASEAN region climbed to more than $3 million or over 171 million pesos this year, based on a report by IBM Security. We dive into the impact of cyber attacks with IBM Cybersecurity Asia Pacific's Chris Hockings, joining us now from Sydney, Australia. Chris, great to have you with us. Why are we seeing a rise in costly data breaches here in Southeast Asia?
Well, I think generally IT is becoming a lot more complex. Infrastructure is being used that is not always inside an organization, but also includes cloud environments. And of course, in Southeast Asia, a growing and vibrant population and economy in so many different countries with a lot of growth and emerging innovation. You know, lots of people accessing these services. So it's really the disconnect or the distance that I talk about between, you know, the IT that services these people and the devices that they use that just creates opportunity for attackers to exploit weaknesses and for financial gain.
Indeed, exploiting the weaknesses in the hardware and the software. But share with us, Chris, what is the methodology in gathering all this data?
So there's a couple of reports we do. The X-Force report, which happened earlier this year, is based on quantitative information, real-world data that we collect. This one is a survey. So we actually go and talk to hundreds and hundreds of clients all around the world, including in ASEAN, and we ask them what the impact of cyber breaches has been over the past year from March to March, and not just the impact, the cause, some of the remediation factors that they've applied in order to resolve these, and ultimately we can start to measure modern ways to reduce this overall cost of breaches.
And of course, this data and this number that you came up with, more than $3 million, is close to 10% higher compared to the previous year. But if you take a look at the cybersecurity teams of various organizations, don't they get to detect these data breaches? Are they aware? Are they secure? Are they protecting themselves from these data breaches, Chris?
Well, yeah, I think, first of all, the increase continues every year. But in this year's finding, there's been some threads of hope. There's lots of modern technology being used, particularly in the area of AI and analytics, to help cyber teams more quickly detect and respond to these breaches. So in the survey, approximately half of organizations that deployed AI and automation in their cybersecurity programs were able to reduce the overall time by 100 days and also the cost by $1.25 million. So we're bringing advanced technology through that's actually been quite effective in reducing the overall cost of a data breach. So if you look back in previous years, some of this technology has been emerging over the last 3 or 4 years, but we're meeting a point now where there's a reality. And so what I'd say about that is the inverse is that those companies, the other 50% that haven't deployed this kind of technology, you can imagine that on average, if it's 10%, then these organizations are suffering much more expensive and difficult cyber breaches to recover from.
All right. What about the Philippines? Where does the country rank in the ASEAN list in terms of costly data breaches? And are the industries and companies here making the investment to avoid these costly data breaches?
Well, I think the ASEAN region has different countries at different levels of maturity. And, I know the Philippines are starting to drive regulatory obligations around data, identity and threat management. So what that tells me is that the government is aware that the infrastructure that consumers rely upon, those critical infrastructure components, need to have some kind of compliance obligation in order to up the investment in cybersecurity. It's been my experience, over the 25 years that whilst, there's a lot of innovation in security, most of the time organizations respond most quickly when they're being asked to meet some kind of regulatory obligations.
And Chris,
overall, I think that, the maturity levels, of the countries, Indonesia, Philippines, etc., are emerging, and with countries such as Singapore leading the way, can help to raise the maturity in those nations as well.
Absolutely. But do organizations in less developed ASEAN countries like the Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand involve law enforcement in investigating these data breaches, or do they just keep it within the company confines?
Well, I think one of the interesting statistics in the report was that organisations that did involve law enforcement were able to reduce the overall cost and the time by almost $500,000. And so organisations that don't involve law enforcement do suffer additional costs. In some countries, it's actually part of the regulatory framework to allow law enforcement to come in and assist in the case of a cyber breach, because they do have more resources, and many companies suffer breaches at different times. So being able to call in the defence force or police to help to investigate, detect and respond to these kinds of breaches is definitely one of the improvements that organisations can make, and it's proven in the data that we've produced both globally and also here in ASEAN.
Chris, thank you so much for sharing IBM's cyber breach report. IBM Cybersecurity Asia Pacific's Chris Hockings joining us from Sydney, Australia.